Does seller financing work better when that person who you're asking to give you seller financing owns the home in cash? Does that work the easiest?
They have the full ownership. Yes, there is no loan on the property. The problem is if there is a loan on a property, someone needs to pay the bank, right? And then you lose your leverage, because you want to use seller finance because you want to move to bring a reduced amount of money up front. Normally you can negotiate 5 to 10% as down payment, and then everything else it's paid in the mortgage style, right? If there is a mortgage already towards the bank, if it is 50%, if it is 25% still to pay off, you need to bring that to the table in order to close, and therefore you lose that advantage of bringing low value to the closing table. That your cash on cash will be affected, right? So you lose your leverage. So in order for this to work for both ends, seller and the buyer, I would say the best persona to target is old landlords that are just tired of being landlords. They own the property on and right, so there is no bank involved, and people that are close to retired. So that is my best persona for being able to close seller financing.
So you target people who own their homes in cash, because that's going to be the easiest conversation to have for seller financing. It's going to, you're eliminating that conversation of like, well, what do I do about my loan? And there's a whole nother conversation you could have about like taking over their loan and all of that, but that just adds to the complication of it.
That's a subject too, right? Strategy, it's a different one where you assume the loan. Well, sometimes you assume, meaning that the bank is okay and is informed about that. That normally happens on commercial buildings. But in single family homes, that doesn't happen. Although you start paying the loan, but it's still in the name of the seller, right? And there's some risks associated with that, because if the bank knows, they will call it for sure. So there's some risk associated. Versus a seller finance, there is no risk. The seller receives a note saying that I own X amount of dollars, and that this is the way I'm paying it. And second one, he will be part of on the lien of the deed for that specific property. So he's covered. If I don't pay him, he can always recover the property.
I'm all about making things as simple as possible. So, if I was going to get into the seller financing world and I just wanted to kind of dip my toe in and not get into all the complications of subject to, I would, like you're saying, and so I like your advice. I just want to kind of bring it to the surface for the listeners of like, I like your advice of like, let's start with people who own their homes cash. Let's start learning that game, because that's a simpler conversation to have. It's an easier conversation to have, kind of get you started in the whole seller financing game. So take me through. So I live in a neighborhood right now. I'm actually looking over this lake. It's on a small lake here in South Charlotte. And there's a very loose HOA. You can actually, even though the neighbors don't like it, you are allowed to Airbnb in this neighborhood. And there's this beautiful house. I don't know if they own it cash or not, but it's been on the market for like almost 8 months. And they're asking like 1.75 million. I mean, it's a pretty good size house. And I just reached out to my agent yesterday and was like, hey, reach out and see if they're willing to sell or finance, just because I thought it could be a really creative deal. So coach me on this, because I don't know everything I'm doing in the seller financing world. So coach me, let's assume they do own it cash, and I want to buy it with as little money down, with the least interest rate possible. And I want to Airbnb this thing and just have this great house on the lake to Airbnb. So how would I go about that? How should I explain that? Just like coach me through that situation. Like what would you do if you were me?
Okay. So the first block that I see there, I see realtors in the middle. And that somehow brings some blocking points. First, you need to understand if you are working with a real estate friendly agent. I assume you are. So we are covered there. So he can explain clearly what is a seller finance. The second one is the seller's agent. does he know what is seller finance? So I lost a deal in Kansas City. It was 1.4 million just because the seller agent didn't allow us to talk directly to the seller and explain him, and he was not being able to explain what was the seller finance to the seller. So we lost that just because there are so many bridges that you need to end up that communication. So if you are able to reach and talk directly to the seller, it's a bonus, and it's a win from the start. So if you can reach out to the seller agent and ask, can we meet the seller, even with the agent present, we don't mind, we just need to get a connection and build trust, right? So that's the first step. The second one is really to try to understand if he owns it, right? If, let's assume he does, and then we just need to understand why is he selling. Trying to understand what is motivation for the sale. Does he need the cash? Does he want to invest in another place? Where can we help him invest in that specific place? So try to build that bridge and that trust. After that, ask him, hey, how much do you want to pay in taxes, right? Because if you're going to get this amount of money, you're pretty going to pay a bunch of money to Uncle Sam. So why don't we work here on a solution that would divert those tax payments? And with that conversation, you try to understand what does it really need, right? And with that, you start building your proposal, and then you can start thinking on what will be the down payment. Is he willing to have 5, 10, 15%? And that's why you need to ask him, how much do you need for the next project, right? Then you start running your numbers and make sure that you can stretch your interest rates up to a certain point, in order for you to understand how much on a mortgage perspective are you going to pay on a monthly basis, right? And then the other question that I always ask is, okay, so we are going to come up with this mortgage payment. So, but when do you really want your full money back? And that's the balloon payment. Normally tends to go for 5 to 15 years. But it really depends on the seller for how much time does he want to defer those tax payments. So again, that's why I think it's so important to get this trust, to build this trust with the seller, because you understand what he wants to do, why he's selling, and then you build your proposal based on those assumptions. And then there is a match. And then he understands, well, this is a win-win situation, right?
So well explained, man. So well explained. That's the most clearly I think I've ever heard like how to do it explained. Very well done.